Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And today we're jumping right in. We're doing our top 5 quarterbacks. We've been teasing this for a while. We're going to go through our position groups that we evaluate. So no offensive linemen because, Tyson and I aren't really experts in that factor. But we're going to, later in this week, we're going to release our wide receivers and cornerbacks episode. We'll have linebackers, edge rushers, and get you kind of going for running backs and tight ends, all that good stuff. So today's the quarterbacks. Before we go any further, like, subscribe, and share. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe. We do appreciate any support you guys give us. But Tyson, we were kind of contemplating, do we start from 5 and work to 1? And we're like, dude, everybody knows who number 1 is. But overall, before we dive into the evaluations, what do you think of this class overall as we've gotten into the evaluation process?
I think everybody has the same top 5. It's just the order that you want to put 2 through 5 in that kind of can change things. I think it's a good quarterback class. I think Caleb Williams obviously kind of brings the level up. It's obvious that if he wasn't in this class, we'd be going, oh, where's the guy? But there's some really good players. There's some really good college players in this class. And I think that we talked about a little bit last week where Caleb Williams has his own warts, but everybody else has way more to pick at and more red flags. So there's a chance, none of these guys hit, and there's a chance that this is there's 5 Pro Bowlers or 4 Pro Bowlers or whatever in this draft class, and it's trying to figure out who is who.
So let's dive into it. We already mentioned that it's Caleb Williams. He's going to be the number one overall pick to the Bears. I just saw Bleacher Report put out a mock draft. They had Drake Maye. Is there anything more clickbait than that? I'll just say that. We don't normally take shots, but that was just absurd. So here's the thing. Like everybody says generational. In the last episode we talked about how we're going to try to get away from that term because you can't have a generational guy 3 draft classes apart. It's just ridiculous. I think this is a platinum chipper. I think blue chip, 5-star guy. This is a platinum chipper. Like you said, if it wasn't for Caleb Williams, we'd be looking at this draft class like, oh, quarterback class is good. But with Caleb Williams in it, you're like, okay, this could potentially be a great class. I know there's concerns with them. I will go through those. But for me, when I watch Caleb Williams, he brings an element of special that you can't teach. The ability to sling the ball off platform, move around, has the athleticism where he can run around, avoid certain hits, and still hit receivers in tight windows and open on the money and where you need it. I think he's easily the best we've seen since Trevor Lawrence as a prospect. But I do think there's some questions, and we'll get into that. But what do you see when you look at Caleb Williams overall?
Oh, he's an elite level playmaker. That much is for sure. And we can, we don't need to kind of dive. The footwork is good. The arm strength is good. The size, people are, oh, is he big enough? Yeah, he's fine. He's going to be just fine. He's good enough athletically, and he can put the ball in spots, throw off platform. Like this is. Everyone keeps saying he's got a little bit Mahomes. This is just what Zach Wilson would look like if he didn't suck. That's kind of like when I watch Caleb Williams, I'm like, damn, there's a lot of stuff this guy can do really well. The biggest concern is the Notre Dame game, the Utah games. Like when people make things ugly, he doesn't win. And the stats can be ridiculous and they're awesome. And, but two years ago in the Pac-12 championship, just getting absolutely steamrolled by a Utah team that was battling a ton of injuries. Cam Rising, comes out and looks like the better player in that game. And that can happen. Notre Dame this past year gets ugly. Utah again this past year. I think in the NFL, he's going to have to learn how to win football games on more than just talent. I think he's a smart football player, but that's why generational is reserved for the Andrew Lucks of the world, is because you have to be football smart walking into this thing at a level that's elite, and he's not there yet.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see. And we go into the frame point. 6'1", 214. I'd be interested to see what his playing weight is at the NFL level. I mean, he's only a junior. He's obviously going to mature into his body. You're not going to teach height, but is he going to play at 225? Is he going to put on a little bit more of that grown man weight? So you kind of take away some of those concerns for the body frame type of conversation. I think at 6'1", listen, the way that the NFL is played now, you move the pocket around. You can do certain things. He's mobile enough where he can shift the pocket, where he can hit people on the run. So I'm not concerned with the height there. Where I do get a little bit of question marks are, what's the leadership like? I know his teammates, despite what people want to say, they have come out and said glowing things about him. Like they are Caleb Williams fans in that building, which a lot of times when you're talked about in a certain era and the you have a bad season like you had last year if you're USC, you can kind of hear some stuff coming out of the locker room. And that wasn't the case through this process. So I think that's going to be a big thing. What's it look like off the field, right? When the money comes, when you're doing commercials,
He's
all
been
that
making money.
sort of stuff. Yeah. But I think as we're talking about just a football player, if you're evaluating this process, what do you get in Caleb Williams? You get an electric arm, you get an electric playmaker, and somebody who I think can really, in 2 years, be a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
Isn't it kind of funny that this is the 7th year now or whatever it is that we're doing this over Lincoln Riley quarterback prospect? It's the exact same questions every time with these guys. And then, outside of Baker Mayfield and the way his Browns career kind of transpired, in 3 years, we kind of go, oh, none of that stuff mattered. Like these dudes can play. Do you think the Cardinals are over the moon that they have Kyler Murray? No, but you make that pick at 10 times out of 10. And I think, to be honest with you, Caleb Williams is closer to a Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow level prospect than he is like Trevor Lawrence, man. It's just funny because he's getting crapped on and we do our fair share of it. But like when you don't lose games until you get to the NFL, it's pretty hard to knock that guy as a prospect. So over the last 10 years or whatever, he slots in at 4. That's pretty good.
The concerns about Caleb Williams, ball security. We know the fumbling issues. Is that him trying to do too much? I think when we talk about USC, oh, well, they didn't have the level of success, and that's a knock on him. Let's be honest here. He wasn't walking into Alabama. Like, I know when Lincoln Riley went over there,
50 points a game,
and the defense gave up 60. Like, they had to do so much. The issue is when you're facing the Pac-12 and you're losing games, there's an issue there, right? Like the offense can only do so much, and you're going to get stopped if you face somebody like a Utah when you point that out, because that defense is good. But the supporting cast, I saw like WAR numbers, so somebody attributed that, and I wish I could shout out who put this together, but it was what the replacement level is for players that he was playing with, and it was surprising how low it was. And maybe it shouldn't be because we kind of think of these skill position players, and it's like, oh, USC's always got flash. It wasn't that case last year with Caleb Williams on the offensive side. So he had to carry the load. And I wonder if that's where the ball security comes from. Is that something that can be taught when, being more strong with the football in the pocket, having 2 hands on the ball, making that your actual habit. So other than that, I really have no red flags about Caleb Williams as a prospect.
Well, and to be clear, he's walking into the best situation that a number 1 quarterback's walked into in a long time, right? He's getting DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, all mock drafts that we're seeing are some combination of wide receiver at 9, whether it's Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or whoever. But the supporting cast is going to be good enough for him to excel. And then, when Keenan Allen's a free agent a year from now and the Bears still have a ton of money and he's put on tape that he can play, that's kind of why you get excited if you're a Chicago Bears fan. And that's why, for the last 2 years, it's been, hey, man, like nobody wants to play with Justin Fields. These people are going to want to come here and play with Caleb Williams. And I think that's, he's got all the makings of a plus starter. Whether that's Pro Bowl or All Pro is to be seen, but that certainly seems like the level.
So let's move into number 2. Tyson and I have the same QB, and I was surprised that he had it, but we both have Drake Maye at number 2 here. And when you're talking about Drake Maye, the numbers are not going to jump off the charts or jump off the page for you. A lot of this is going to be a similar conversation with the supporting cast. I think out of these top 5 players that Tyson and I have, he had the least amount of support around him. Only 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 3,600 yards. Not a lot going on there. And when he misses big, he misses. Like that's the concern that you have with Drake Maye. But this kid is the prototype, right? Like you look at his frame, you look at his size, 6'4", 223 pounds. I think he's going to put on more weight again once he gets a little bit older. He's a redshirt sophomore. So, 3 years and he's coming out in the draft. So that lends you to thinking he's going to grow. He's got time. You're going to be able to get a couple contracts out of him if he's the guy. So Drake Maye, to me, has all the makings of the prototype quarterback. Huge arm. His pro day was super impressive, the way he was making throws. But again, the misses, that's where you're like, man, that's where you get a little concerned.
And I think, he's the benefactor, at least right now, of some of these big, giant quarterbacks, athletic freaks with rocket arms that have poor footwork that have ended up working out, right? Like Josh Allen worked out. Justin Herbert has been working out for the Chargers. Carson Wentz before the injuries worked out. And I know that might not be people's favorite thing to hear around draft season, but he's got some wins in his game, man. Especially, you mentioned when he misses big, and a lot of those are on little flare passes because he's got the crazy arm, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to take that 10-yard pass and kind of layer that thing in there. But he's supremely accurate and can fit the ball into tighter windows than I think everybody else in this class when he gets things going. The footwork is a huge concern. And I want to be clear that the drop from 1 to 2 is much bigger than the drop from 2 to 3, because you can convince either one of us, with a strong argument of a couple other guys that is your quarterback too. I think Drake Maye has the most upside because I think you can coach the footwork into him. This might be, he's not going to get the opportunity, but this is man, I would love to be able to sit this guy for 9 games and just really sink my teeth into him, because I think if he comes out right away and you throw him in the fire, it's 50-50. But if you give him 9 games or a season to learn behind somebody, and you kind of install the playbook as he's learning and growing as a passer, then all of a sudden, we got maybe not a Jordan Love situation, but we got a really, really good quarterback in year 2.
Yeah, and the prospect grade for NFL.com, as these guys evaluate the scouts that work over there, they have a 6.5 on him, which is boomer bust type of grade. I think that's fair in a way, because either he's going to be, let's just throw a name out there because they play different positions. Either he's going to be Josh Allen, because that's what we kind of said about Josh Allen, right? Either he's going to hit because his raw potential is insane, or he's not going to be able to fix the accuracy. He's not going to be able to do all certain things, and he's going to kind of fizzle out. I think you can look at Drake Maye the same way, but for someone who has that gifted of an arm, I think you can teach the footwork. Let's be honest. Mac Brown, legendary coach when he was at Texas. North Carolina, just not on the same level as somebody who goes to, let's just say, Kalen DeBoer, Jim Harbaugh, Lincoln Riley. Like, these other quarterbacks have been able to work with. Brian Kelly. I know people hate him, but he's a quarterback guy. And Drake Maye doesn't quite have, during his 3 years in college, the same level of work that he was doing with some offensive teaching minds. So I think that'll be a great thing for the NFL, is they can get their hands on Drake Maye. He's solely focusing on footwork, things that he needs to do. I think that'll be a benefit. So I think I think his floor is actually higher than just bust. I don't think he's going to be a bust. Now, is he going to be a top 10 quarterback? I think maybe he could be like a Kirk Cousins, where he's formidable, where he can play, but he'll never quite crack that upper echelon. I'm much higher than him, I think, than other people around the country. I know a lot of people have the next guy at number 2, but I just think there's just too much raw potential here for Drake Maye. And if he can clean up the accuracy, if he can clean up the dumb decision-making, then I think you got a really special talent here.
Well, I mean, everybody was throwing the towel for Howell. That was the slogan for the NFL in 2021. And then obviously Sam Howell doesn't have a great year and goes in the 5th round. But as soon as Drake Maye comes out in 2022, it was like, oh, this guy has been better than Sam Howell the whole time. And he flashed some crazy arm talent that year as well. And, he was throwing to Tez Walker, who's a really good player, and just kind of barely misses in our wide receiver episode that we're going to release later this week. So we're not going to have a ton of time to talk about him, but the supporting cast is way different. And this is the first time you watch the North Carolina offense where you're like, wait, they want to throw the ball?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the number 3 guy, Jayden Daniels from LSU. And I want to say something real quick, because I agree. The drop-off, here's how I kind of look at it. The drop-off from Caleb Williams to Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels is substantial. Like, so I have it tiered this way: platinum talent, platinum chipper, and Caleb Williams. I think the second tier with Maye and Daniels, and then there's one guy and then a group of guys below the 4th guy for me. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that when we get there. But I think these two, you can kind of go either way. The concern I have for Daniels is he maxed out? Like, did we see the absolute potential that we saw Jayden Daniels at LSU when he's throwing to 2 NFL wide receivers, when he has a great offensive line in front of him, when he has a great offensive mind in Brian Kelly and the offensive scheme? Are we just seeing the max of Jayden Daniels? And if that's the max, I mean, you're going to have a productive quarterback. I mean, he's a dual threat prototype. Like, we talked about the typical prototype for a quarterback in Drake Maye. Sure, that's if you're standing in the pocket and throwing. If you want to get to the new mobile style, move the pocket with your feet and be able to take off and run, that's Jayden Daniels. So you got to be comfortable with that if you're willing to draft Jayden Daniels. He has to kind of fit with what you're looking for and how you want to run the offense. Because if you're just looking for a Big Ben, if you're just looking for a Peyton Manning, this isn't your guy. But if you're willing to work with him and utilize his strengths, I think there's a potential that Jayden Daniels can work in the NFL.
He's so confusing because he's a better thrower of the football than Lamar Jackson, at least when Lamar Jackson was coming out. And obviously he's older, so he's had more time to work. Because that's the one funny thing about this Jayden Daniels process is nobody's being like, hey, remember when he sucked at Arizona State? Like, remember how bad that offense was? So that's kind of getting swept under the rug. But he's got a lot of Justin Fields in his game as well. And what I mean by that is he takes sacks at a rate that it's unsustainable. And that's why I have him here at 3. I think he doesn't necessarily play with anticipation the way that you'd like to see from a quarterback like this. And it's funny because he just had maybe the best statistical season in the history of college football for a quarterback. Like his numbers were crazy. But when Brian Thomas Jr. is 4 yards open down the middle of the field and Malik Neighbors beat his guy 3 yards out of the slot, it's a little bit different. I think he layers the ball well enough to be a good player. But again, he takes so many hits and he's walking in here. This is not the size concerns with Caleb Williams because he's 6'4". This is size concerns because he weighs 185 pounds. And it's going to get really scary because he is willing to stand in there and take the hit every single time. And that's awesome until it's not. And I think that's a real red flag for NFL teams. Just go back to this Alabama game this past year. He was playing really well. They're down 2 touchdowns. LSU has the ball. It looks like he's going to lead a drive, score a touchdown, and go down 1. Stays in the pocket and gets absolutely rocked, concussed, misses the rest of that game. And that's just going to be reality in the NFL because the 11 guys on defense are here to rip your head off.
Cam Newton got hurt playing the style that Jayden Daniels Anthony Richardson. And these guys are monsters, freaks athletically, 50 pounds more than Jayden Daniels. I know he's listed at 210. He does not weigh 210 pounds. Like, I'm sorry. That guy is thin. The other concern I have with Daniels, and I'll get into some of his positives because I know I feel like I'm being a little negative because I like him as a prospect. It's just a lot of times when you watch him on tape, if the first read isn't there, takes off. That's great in college. It's great when you're athletically better than a lot of the players are playing against. And you're playing in the SEC. There's a bunch of freaks down there who's going to play on Sundays. But like we've seen, the playing field gets leveled out quick when you get into the NFL level. So that's one concern I have. You got to still be able to make throws, and you got to get off your first read and be able to progress. What I do like about him is the willingness to shift the pocket. He can throw the ball down the field while on the run. So if you're going to be running and taking off and doing all those things, like you said, where you're going to be running around and trying and staying in there and trying to force plays down the field, I want the quarterback who can still hit on that. Some guys who just stand back there and kind of just lollygag and throw around or kind of throw up a lollipop and it's not there. That's where you get in trouble at the NFL level because the safeties can come over and pick that off. He's shown the ability where he can drive it into windows. He can manipulate defenses. I think that comes from his 5 years in college football. So even though he's older than Caleb Williams and Drake Maye, he's had some more polish on being able to manipulate defenses, especially 2 years with Brian Kelly working at an NFL type of offense. And so that's the positives I see from him. I do think if you can put together an offense that's going to play off of his strengths, I think he's going to find success in the NFL. What his ceiling is, I don't think it's as high as Drake Maye or Caleb Williams. That's why he's my number 3 quarterback. But to me, this is a very solid quarterback prospect. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to perform well.
I think he's got the highest ceiling in the class. Like if everything works out well, and like you hit on Jayden Daniels, he will be an elite touchdown scorer. And at the end of the day, that's what the name of the game is. He doesn't turn the ball over a ton. One of the things that's funny when we talk about his supporting cast is like nobody brings up Mason Taylor. And that was is a very good college tight end. And he wasn't necessarily featured in the offense, but if you watched a lot of Brian Kelly football, you're kind of like, maybe that guy should be getting the ball more. And I think that was a lot of Jayden Daniels missing him open over the middle of the field because he is so quick to bail. And so this is just kind of like you mentioned that Drake Maye is graded as a boom or bust. I believe Jayden Daniels' floor is higher than people are saying. But I do think like this is, he might be on a new team by year 4 or he's getting extended and resetting the market.
So let's get into your number 4 because you have Michael Penix, the quarterback from Washington. And so, spoiler, he's my 5. We have our 4-5 flipped. So I'll let you talk about Michael Penix. I'll talk about McCarthy, and we'll do the inverse when we move into our number fives.
So if the national championship game didn't happen, where would Michael Penix Jr. be mocked right now? Because it wouldn't be the second round. He'd be much closer to 12 with Oakland. And I understand he didn't look great in that national championship. My only real big concern with Michael Penix Jr. Is in the Oregon game, in the Michigan game. He gets up at the end and he's holding on to his chest. And we know the injury history and all this stuff. It's funny, you know, he comes out and he runs a 3-second 40-yard dash, and everyone goes, "Oh, I didn't know Michael Penix was athletic." Like, do we not remember 9-win Indiana? Like, do you not remember him scoring with? I know you do. Ball extended against Penn State.
Well, he was short
to win a game. Just being a plus athlete, and he's a guy who has a long injury history, but he's also a throwing machine. Like, he's got a solid arm. I think he's the best placer of the football in this class. You can cut on any game. Even the ones where Washington wasn't scoring a ton of points this past season, and back shoulder throws, he's the best in the class. I really don't even know how close that is. This is a guy that I think is going to start for a long time. I don't know if he's going to end up reaching the level of some of these other guys, especially the three we have in front of him, and maybe even year 4 and the guy I have behind him might end up being a better professional football player. But I have no doubt in my mind that Michael Penix Jr. is going to play in the league for 10 years. And I think, you know, it's funny because when we're in draft season, that's not what you want to hear. You don't want the guy that's going to play for 10 years. You want the superstar. But the age thing is so funny because I don't care if he's 25. If he plays till 35, that you smashed. That's a fantastic pick, and that's who this guy is.
So I like Michael Penix, and I'll get into it. I just have McCarthy one above him because he wasn't asked to do a lot. So I think you're still scratching the surface with him. Jim Harbaugh, who knows quarterbacks, can't stop gushing about him. You know, he made a play, made a decision to put McCarthy into the starting position, moved off of Cade McNamara, who took him to the college football playoff, won the Big Ten championship for him. And he's like, no, McCarthy's the guy here. And they reached this height of success. Like, they won the national championship. And everybody points to, and we kind of did it a little tongue in cheek, you know, oh, he wasn't thrown in the second half against Penn State, or, oh, they didn't ask him to do a whole lot. That says a lot about him. But if you kind of think back to how they utilized his arm, it was a lot of, hey, this is third down. It's a big moment. You got to go make a play for us. And more times than not, he did. Like, his percentage on third down is ridiculous. Just an effective playmaker on third down. I think he's more athletic than people want to give him credit for, which bodes well in this National Football League, and especially in this era. 6'2.5", 220. You know, he's stout. He's solid. And he was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. A 5-star guy, was kind of a no-brainer. Everybody kind of projected him to be a first-round pick when he was coming to college. And so he finally got to prove it at Michigan. He got tutelage from Jim Harbaugh. I think he's going to be a good player. Now, is he a day one starter for me outside of anywhere besides the Vikings? No. He's one of those guys I think you stash for a year and teach him. Kind of like a Jordan Love, although, you know, he got 3 years. But I think if you sit McCarthy down and kind of teach him and continue to develop him, I think he's going to be a really good football player in the NFL. The concerns I have, doesn't quite do everything exceptional, right? Like, he can rip the ball in the windows, but it doesn't pop off the charts. You kind of watch him and you're not really overwhelmed. That's against Big Ten speed. And I know he did it against Ohio State, and he did it against some NFL players at Penn State, but the NFL is just a different animal, man. Like, you don't have the athletic dominance that Michigan had over pretty much everybody they played. And so that's my concern I have with him. But I do think he projects to be a solid starter. Don't quite know how high his ceiling is going to be, but I think his floor is actually pretty high. That's the only reason why I have him above Michael Penix.
Yeah, I think J.J. McCarthy's floor is really high as well. And I agree with everything pretty much that you said. For the positives for him, I'll go into my own kind of negatives here. And the reason that I have him swap with Penix, I don't love his football instinct. And I think that's the number one thing. I think he's late. A lot of times those third down numbers are awesome, but that's because it's predetermined where he's going to go with the football. He misses guys late and he misses vertically quite a bit. Now, Michigan didn't necessarily have the best receiving core in the country, right? Like, Roman Wilson's a good player. They have some really good players, but they don't have, again, it wasn't USC's supporting cast. It wasn't LSU's supporting cast. It was better certainly than North Carolina's, but it was worse than Washington. And so it's hard to kind of go with that. And they played a different style of offense. I think his mechanics are good enough for every NFL team to look at him and go, we can kind of plug that guy in right now, and he'll learn the playbook and we'll be good to go. But again, you know, there's something to be said. I like the freewheeling guys, right? Like that to me, I think that shows, hey man, like I got trust in my guys and I'm ready to rip this thing when I think that I've exploited a weakness. Where JJ McCarthy kind of needs you to spell out to him, hey, he's open over the middle of the field because he's running with his eyes up, but he's looking 7 yards down the field instead of 17, and that's a huge difference in the NFL.
Michael Penix to me is the most intriguing quarterback in this draft class. I mean, I had him, full transparency, number 4 on my list when the season ended. I thought for sure I was going to keep him there above McCarthy. Through the testing process, through the combine, became more and more impressed with McCarthy, and he kind of combined that with the tape. Okay, I'll bump him up. And to me, I agree with what you said. I mean, the arm talent, I think, everybody talked about the big arm, Joe Mixon, but arm talent, I don't think there's anybody with a better arm talent in this class than Michael Penix. He can throw it deep. He can fit it in the windows. Like you said, back shoulder. He has touch. It's impressive what he can do.
How's this? He's got the best arm motion in conjunction with playing football, because I don't think anybody's touching Joe Milton as far as like how far can you just throw a football.
No, well, that's what I'm saying. But Milton doesn't have the touch, right?
Right.
Penix does. Penix has everything with the arm. I think his arm is more talented than Caleb Williams. Just if you combine everything, like you pointed out earlier, with the back shoulder throws, with the touch, with bombing it down the field and throwing insane deep balls. And so that's why, to me, Michael Penix is the most intriguing draft prospect here, because I think the ceiling on this guy, if he hits, holy smokes, you're looking at a Byron Leftwich, man. Like the arm talent that Leftwich had was ridiculous. And if Penix goes to the right situation, if he hits, this dude could legitimately have just one of the most insane runs in terms of what he's doing. Like you're looking at highlight tapes, like he fit that into what? Like he threw it there. Like it was ridiculous. Some of the stuff he was doing at Washington. The concerns I have, and I know you're going to poo-poo this, it is the age for me, because I don't think anybody looks at Penix right now and says, okay, he can start day one. Like, if he goes to the right situation, maybe, like, let's just say he goes to the Dolphins. Okay, then maybe he can do something there, but they're not going to take him. That's not going to be where he goes. Like, if he goes to the Vegas Raiders, are we going to look at Michael Penix and saying, oh, he's going to have a great rookie year? I don't think so. So I think you're going to have to sit him. And at that point, he's going to be 25, 26. And if you're, like you said, if he does play 10 years, that's great. And he ends up being 36, you got him for a decade. That's still successful. But that does scare me. The clock is pretty much running on him. And the injury concerns against what happens if you do lose a year? What happens if you have, maybe not even a full year, but you lose him for 8 games? I think that's where you start having some conversations and you have those red flags about him. Even though I love him as a prospect, I just had to bump him down as number 5.
We'll get into our kind of like where we think these guys are going to land in a later episode, but I do want to say the number one match, I think, for all of these quarterback prospects, and I know the Vikings are the one because they have the best group of pass catchers. If Michael Penix Jr. ends up in Seattle, it's wheels up. It's Ryan Grubb. It's those guys. Like, that's the spot where I'm looking right now. And I look, nobody in the world has him mocked to Seattle because Mike McDonald, Geno's the starter. We're not going to look, man. We've been investing tons and tons into this defensive unit. I know it's not the one you drafted, but let's go ahead and let's throw a 5th-year option on this guy. Let him sit for a year and then take it off. Who's your best for the rest? Who else do you have that just missed the cut?
Bo Nix. I mean, I'm not infatuated by Bo Nix, but I think he's better than the rest of the class.
Yeah, I mean, they're all the same. I think after you get past this one, I'm most intrigued by Michael Pratt. Well, I watched a ton of Tulane football. I think that he's going to end up like sticking around the league for a long time. But again, the Bo Nix stuff to the Broncos in the first round is just ridiculous to me. And if it happens, it's going to be ridiculous as well.
Yeah, I can't see it at all. Okay, that's our top 5 quarterbacks. Like, subscribe, and share. Smash the like on the way out. Smash the subscribe on the way out. Like Tyson said, we'll be back doing our wide receivers and cornerbacks episode all in the same one. That'll come out later this week. Make sure you stay subscribed so you don't miss a thing. We'll talk to y'all then, guys. Peace.